The morning light drifted slowly over red clay ridge, soft enough to feel like breath against the earth, warm enough to stir the dust into lazy spirals. It was the kind of dawn that made a lonely man wonder whether life was offering him another chance or simply repeating an old ache. Elias Crow stood outside the trading post with that same hesitation resting in his chest, thumbs hooked on his belt, eyes carrying a weight he never spoke about. People said the cowboy was steady as stone and twice as silent, but the truth was simpler. He didn't know how to let anyone close enough to hurt him again. Inside, Naira Willowhawk swept the wooden floor with quiet strokes, each movement careful and measured, as if she feared taking up too much space. She had lived her life like that, on the edges of other people's kindness, in the shadows of their expectations, carrying herself with the composure of someone who learned long ago that raising her voice meant losing the little she had. She didn't notice Elias at first. She rarely noticed anyone who was in trouble. When she finally looked up, he stepped forward with the awkwardness of a man trying not to look desperate. "I'll say this plain," he murmured, voice low enough that only the dust motes seemed to hear. "I will never marry you. I just need someone to cook. Someone who can keep the place warm." The broom paused midair. For a moment she simply stared at him, her eyes steady and unreadable, but the faint tightening of her jaw betrayed the sting. Behind them, a pair of ranch wives exchanged knowing glances. One whispered, "Well, it's more than she's had offered before," loud enough for Naira to hear. She didn't flinch this time, but something inside her folded quietly, the way a flower closes at the first hint of frost. "I can work," she answered softly. "If the pay includes room and food, I'll manage." Her acceptance didn't surprise him. Survival rarely left space for pride. But as they left together, Elias felt the eyes of the town burning into his back, judgment mixed with amusement, the usual seasoning of frontier gossip. No one expected him to offer tenderness. No one expected her to ask for it. The ride to his cabin was silent. Normal weather carried a cool, steady breeze that rustled the prairie grass in soft waves. Naira kept her gaze forward, spine straight, face unreadable. Elias tried to speak once, then stopped, feeling the words crumble before they reached his tongue. When they arrived, she stepped inside and took in the bare shelves, the cold fireplace, the chair facing another empty one. She didn't ask who had once sat there. She understood ghosts well enough. From the first day, their arrangement fell into a gentle, uneasy rhythm. Naira cooked simple meals with steady hands, beans simmered with herbs, biscuits that filled the cabin with warm scents, stews that made the walls feel less hollow. Elias repaired a broken stool so she wouldn't fall, then replaced the fraying rope on the well bucket so she wouldn't strain her wrists. Neither mentioned their small kindnesses. They simply slid into place like quiet threads weaving two separate lives toward a single pattern neither had intended. Still, the air between them stayed tense, not hostile but uncertain, like two souls circling a fire without knowing how close they were allowed to stand. When Elias took her into town for supplies, whispers followed them like dust trails. "He treats her like hired help. Reckon she ain't allowed in the house. Does she even sleep inside?" Naira kept her chin high, the same way she had when she first learned the world would not soften just because she did. Elias heard every word. Shame crawled under his skin, and he found himself clenching his fists to keep from snapping back. He had spent his life ignoring opinions, yet suddenly every careless comment felt like a stone flung in her direction. When a drunken ranch hand muttered, "Crow's got himself a cook, not a woman," Elias went still, not from fear, but from the sudden realization that he did not like anyone defining her worth, especially not that way. That evening, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted. Naira ladled stew quietly, set his bowl down without meeting his eyes. The silence stretched thin between them, until Elias finally forced himself to break it. "I heard what they said," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "About you. About me. I should have." "You don't owe me anything," she said, voice calm but heavy. "I know what I am to you. A pair of hands. A warm stove. Nothing more." Her words struck him harder than the gossip. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, searching for something honest enough to bridge the distance. "You're more than that." I don't know how to deserve someone like you." Naira looked at him then, really looked, and saw something fragile in the rugged lines of his face, regret, caution, and a longing he did not know how to name. The wind outside pushed gently at the walls, and for a moment the cabin felt like a place that might become a home if either dared to reach a little further. But the world rarely allows tenderness to grow without testing it. Late that night, heavy footsteps approached the cabin. A fist slammed against the door. The same drunken ranch hand stood outside with two others, faces crudely lit by lantern glow. "Crow," he shouted. "Bring her out. We ain't letting some outsider woman settle here like she belongs." Elias moved before Naira could. He stepped in front of her, jaw tight, shoulders squared. "You're on my land. Get off it." The men pushed forward, forcing the door open. The lantern spilled across the room, glinting off metal and shadow. One grabbed Elias by the collar, the others shouting insults that blended into a cruel, ugly roar. Elias fought back, fists meeting bone, boots scraping across wooden planks. A chair toppled. The stew pot crashed, spilling its warmth across the floorboards like a hearth bleeding out. Through the chaos, Naira saw something she had not expected. Elias fighting not out of pride, but out of a fierce desire to protect. And for the first time in years, fear rose in her chest, not fear for herself, but for him. She grabbed his rifle, stumbled for a moment under its weight, then slammed the barrel hard against the doorframe. The crack rang through the prairie like a warning shot, though no bullet had been fired. The sound startled the attackers, sending them scrambling into the night, tripping over each other in their haste. Elias and Naira stood there breathing hard, the cabin a mess around them, stew pooling across the floor like a fallen blessing. Elias turned to her slowly, his chest rising and falling, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. He brushed a trembling strand of hair from her cheek. "Naira, you're not just a cook. You're the reason this place feels alive." Her voice shook as she answered, "And you're the first man who ever stood between me and the world." Their closeness held more power than any embrace. It was the beginning of something fragile and profound, something neither dared to name, yet neither wanted to lose. Morning arrived gently, sunlight slipping over the horizon in pale gold. Word of the night's trouble traveled fast. Elias and Naira walked into town together, shoulders brushing, their silence no longer cold but shared. Some folks looked away in guilt, others nodded in newfound respect. At the ridge, where the land opened wide into a river of grass and earth, Elias stopped. He turned toward her with a steadiness he had never possessed before. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I don't want just a warm house. I want you here, not as help, as someone who matters to me." Naira didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. The way her hand slipped into his said enough. It was a gesture soft as dawn, strong as truth. And as they stood together overlooking the valley, the old soul of the story, the one who remembers such things, whispered to whoever cared to listen, "Sometimes love doesn't shout. Sometimes it comes gently, through repaired stools, shared silence, and the bravery of two lonely hearts daring to believe they deserve something more." Like, comment, or tell us where you're watching from.